Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Ola Tamanova, and it's my pleasure to see all of you here in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. It's been 10 years of the war, and today is day 468 of the full-scale invasion of our home led by Russian aggressor. And today we've all become witness of another terroristic act by Russian Federation, by the aggressor state, who blew up our Kakhovka hydraulic power plants. So this is what we are about to talk about today. Our speakers are Nataliya Handel, the researcher of Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. Good afternoon, Miss Natalia. I'm hoping you're hearing us. Yes, I'm hearing you. Good afternoon. And Mykola Yurlov, senior legal expert at Hounds. So the question that we're all facing, what should be the first actions by our country, by our government in the legal field to bring to liability the terrorist state after this terroristic act? Please, Mr. Mykola. Good afternoon. First of all, we have to clearly realize that here we're talking about the violation of the Geneva Conventions, the additional protocol to them, Article 56, which directly prohibits the attacks of the facilities that have hazardous forces, that contain hazardous forces, specifically dams and hydraulic power plants. These facilities should not end up under attack, even if they may pose as military targets. Here we're talking about the Kakhovka hydraulic power plant, which was under the control of the occupiers, and they were in full responsibility of what was going on in the territory of the power plant. So any statements by them that it could be used by the Ukrainians during counteroffensive have no actual grounds. It's the direct attack, and it's most likely a serious violation of the additional protocol to the Geneva Conventions. Ms. Natalia, what's your opinion in this regard? I apologize. Can you please repeat the question, because I've misheard it? We were talking about the first actions by our government to bring to liability the terrorist state. First of all, as Mr. Yuri just mentioned, here we're talking about the violation of both conventional and regular standards of international humanitarian law, so it can be qualified as the war crime through violation of the Article 56 of the first additional protocol, and the consequences that resulted from the warfare activities as to the resilient consequences for ecosystems may be qualified as ecocide, and there is an Article 441 in the Criminal Code of Ukraine which describes the ecocide, but there may be additional qualification through war crimes. It's the terrorizing of civil population, is creation of circumstances and conditions through destruction of the dam of Kakhovka HPP, which will result in problems with water supply for civil population who resides in Kherson region, and it also adds to the qualification as to the violation of international humanitarian law, and it's a likely war crime. Ms. Mykola, Ms. Natalia, the question to you: what organizations, international organizations, Ukrainian organizations, should be involved in documenting the evidences, involved in the process to make sure that the punishment is due? Well, we have to mention that Ukraine works very closely with International Criminal Court, who has a jurisdiction to consider all those events unfolding in our territory since the 2014, and respectively International Criminal Court can consider those events in the context of Article 8 Part 2, sub-article B, the intentional attack with an intention to cause harm to civil facilities or to harm to the health or death to the persons, or a sustainable harm to the environment. So here we're talking about the fact, the likely fact of another war crime being committed by Russian Federation, and that's why we should have very clear and unanimous communication by the government and civil organizations as to the non-acceptance of further war crimes and provision of further political, military and financial support to Ukraine so that we can liberate all of our territories and to stop the further war crimes. Miss Natalia. Really, I agree with Mr. Andriy about, and as to the mechanism for bringing to liability of the top level government officials and military command of Russian Federation, because we see a planned and intentional policy in violation of the international humanitarian law by the military of Russian Federation during this international armed conflict. So let's talk about the reaction of international community. We've seen statements by certain European leaders. What else do we expect? What are the steps by them that we expect? We're awaiting for the further military support of Ukraine. In our opinion, the most efficient method is incessant and resilient support of Ukraine to make sure that we are capable of liberating all of our territories. That will be the most efficient step that will allow in future to initiate or expedite the existing legal processes to bring to liability directly the persons guilty of this crime. Thank you, Miss Natalia. What is your opinion? Again, I agree with aforementioned by Mr. Mykola. We need the political support for Ukraine, and this support should be both on international level within international organizations and on the national level as well through the statements by the countries which will stimulate Russia to stop the aggression, to bring Russian Federation to international liability, both political and financial. And also we should involve the Institute of Personal Criminal Liability to bring to liability those guilty of war crimes, of crimes against humanity and crimes of genocide which are being committed in Ukraine as a result of aggression by Russian Federation. And today's situation is just another confirmation of this systemic policy against Ukraine and Ukrainian people exercised by Russian Federation. First of all, I'm talking about the top-level government official and military command. Dear colleagues, if you have any questions, please join our conversation. Good afternoon. Olga Panasenko, Ukrinform. The consequences of today's crime committed by Russian Federation cover not only the liberated part of Ukraine, but also the occupied territories. Can you please tell us to what extent the crimes are being documented in the occupied part of Ukraine? Thank you. I'm the representative of Truth Hounds organization, and one of the areas of our work is the documenting of crimes committed in Ukraine, including the occupied territories. We cannot disclose all the instruments that we use for this work for the sake of security of the witnesses, but I want to assure you that the work is in progress. It's being done not only by us, but there are two coalitions of civil organizations who jointly document all the facts of violation of human rights, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes of genocide that are being committed by Russian occupiers. Ms. Natalia? I just want to add that in the occupied territories, the responsibility for all the processes, the safety, security, including water supply, is vested in the occupier according to the international laws. So all the violations of those laws may be qualified as a serious violations of international humanitarian law, such as war crimes, and human rights organizations in Ukraine document when possible all those violations, and the prosecutor's office in Ukraine is also involved in documenting such crimes. Dear colleagues, I know that you are all a part of Coalition Ukraine 5 AM. The coalition published the official statement. If we may, let's pronounce it. What's the essence of it? What's your joint stance on this issue? I honestly haven't seen the final version of the statement so far, so I cannot give you any comments in this regard. Ms. Nataliya, maybe you are aware of the statement already. Well, first of all, the statement condemns such actions. They are qualified as the likely violation of the relevant international humanitarian law standards, as it was already says, the conventional norms of it, and taking into account the fact that the facilities that contain hazardous forces, they have special protection in compliance with the international humanitarian law. The high threshold of protection, and this is why such actions are qualified as a war crime. And it also says that in the view of the consequences for the environment, such activities may be qualified as ecocide, because in Ukrainian criminal code the relevant article is in place, and we have to take into account the sustainable nature of these consequences for the ecosystems of Ukraine. Thank you very much for this conversation. Thank you for joining our broadcast. Dear colleagues, thank you for your interest. Right now our team is working on the schedule for tomorrow, so please stay tuned, and we want to thank our armed forces and work together for our victory. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.